Looping Back to the Beginning by Feneris. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. When Class 1A finds itself in a time loop centered around their first year at UA, after getting over the usual angst, they decide that the best way to grow as heroes is by antagonizing dangerous villains for fun and amusement. Chapter 1. Dear Mr. Shigaraki, we regret to inform you that due to unforeseen circumstances, All Might will be unavailable for your villainous attack on the UA Unforeseen Joint Simulator at 10:45 a.m. If you wish to reschedule your villainous attack for a later date, please get in contact with us as soon as possible. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. Shigaraki stepped out of the portal and surveyed the group standing before him. All Might wasn't there, just a bunch of kids standing around gawking at him. Why wasn't All Might here? See? One of the kids suddenly called out. I told you he would be stupid enough to actually do it. A loud grumble came from the group, and sheaves of money changed hands. Aizawa zipped up his sleeping bag and laid out on the floor of the bus. He gave it 20 minutes before 13 realized the emergency they had been called out for was a prank. That was 20 minutes of interrupted sleep while his kids pounded the shit out of the League of Villains. There was a shattering of glass and a villain bounced off the hood of the bus. Aizawa cracked open an eye. No one particularly dangerous. He closed his eyes again. Those kids had it under control. I don't get it, Present Mike admitted. He's been so well rested lately. That's not a bad thing, but he's never been well rested. Never! I don't think he's ever gotten more than 6 hours of sleep in a row since high school. There's also his class to consider, too, Midnight added, frowning at the thought. What about them? All Might asked. They seem like good kids from what I can tell. He never expelled any of them, Present Mike clarified. He hasn't even threatened to expel them. He even let them attend the opening ceremony. That's unusual. He hasn't had a single class where he didn't expel at least one kid on the first day. Oh. A long silence fell over the staff room. I think we may have an imposter here, Midnight finally declared. Late last night, the infamous vigilante Stain was arrested by local police after being rescued from a tree in Honshu Municipal Park. Late last night, the infamous vigilante Stain was arrested by local police after being rescued from a tree in Honshu Municipal Park in the hours after midnight. According to sources within the police department, they received an anonymous tip-off which led them to finding the vigilante in question hanging from a tree by a bright red ribbon. Witnesses report that Stain was restrained by several sheets of brightly colored wrapping paper, that his limbs were tied with more bright red ribbons. Police have not released any details as to how Stain might have gotten in such a situation, but have asked for any witnesses who may have seen the incident to come forward. Hey, hands, dude, Dabby called out, carrying 2 boxes of pizza into the room. Why'd you order pizza delivered to your secret hideout? The fuck? Shigaraki turned from his place in front of the TV. I didn't order pizza! Dabby's eyebrows rose. Pizza guy said someone named Shigaraki had placed the order. Hey guys! Toga bounced into the room. Hey, you ordered pizza, Hansy? Awesome! I didn't! Kurogiri followed in Toga's wake. He looked over at one of the pizza boxes in Dabby's hands and let out a sigh that spoke of long years of frustrated suffering. Why did you order a pizza delivered to our hideout, Shigaraki? I didn't order the goddamn pizzas! He snatched the boxes from Dabby and flipped open the lid. He was kind of hoping to find a bomb inside, just to prove he didn't order the damn things. Instead, he found an extra-large pepperoni with mushrooms. "Good luck with your attack at the training camp," smiley face, was written on the underside of the lid. "Hey! I want a slice from that one!" Toga protested. There's a sign. It's bright, yellow, and wasn't there when they scouted the coordinates for this place. "Warning! Landmines!" it says in big black letters. There's a picture, too. It shows a stick figure flying through the air in pieces. The stick figure has a bunch of severed hands attached to its body. "I think they might be expecting us," Dabby suggested. "Well, of course this is part of the plan!" Bakugo straightened against the restraints that held him to the chair. "You think we didn't know you planned to kidnap me and take me to your secret base where you keep all your Nomu?" "You're bluffing!" Toga sing-songed. "You don't have a clue where you are!" Bakugo glared. 674 Kamino Ward, Yokimasha. The big creepy warehouse next to the old fishing packing plant. The only reason I'm still here is so that the pro heroes have a reason to bust you. We don't have the licensing to kick your fucking asses. Otherwise, we do it ourselves." Spinner interrupted by clearing his throat. He held up a little plastic baggie. "This was left on our doorstep." Inside was a red toothbrush and a paper note that just said, "Bakugo forgot this." Midoriya had had his provisional license for just under a day, and he was already in the hospital. In his defense, he wasn't the person getting treated. But the little girl clinging to his costume refused to let go, no matter how the nurses and doctors tried to coax her. "I walked down the street when she ran into my legs," Midoriya was explaining to the police officer taking his statement. "And then the building blows up, so I grabbed her and immediately fled to a safe location, where we waited for the first responders to arrive." "And you don't know where she came from or who her parents might be?" He gave a half shrug. The other arm was holding onto Eri, who flinched and looked away as the nurse tried to take her blood pressure. "She said her name was Eri. She didn't want to go back." The officer glanced down at Eri and at the scars covering the arm she was holding out. The look the nurse gave him said the rest. Looks like social services would be getting involved. When all was said and done, Inko Midoriya was the official foster mother to a little girl who seemed to have no presence in any official records, while police and professional heroes pored over the remnants of the burned-out complex that was rapidly generating more questions than answers. The fact that Class 1A collectively smelled like a structural fire for a week went largely unremarked upon. Shigaraki stepped out of the portal and surveyed the group standing before him. All Might wasn't there. Just a bunch of kids standing around gawking at him. Why wasn't All Might here? "Yes!" one of the kids suddenly cheered. "An arch nemesis! We're set for life!" "What?" He must have said that out loud because the entire group turned to look at him as one. "You need an arch nemesis if you really want to make it big in this industry," a kid with spiky blonde hair explained. "Peaceful times without megalomaniacs running around driving up the crime rate is bad for industry. You might think All Might would be what he is if he didn't have All for One driving up his public image." Confusion is swirling around his head, and then it turned to anger. "How dare you! I am not some stepping stone to advance your careers. I'm going to kill you all right now." "Excellent! Keep doing that!" another kid cheered. "We'll be set before we're even at a high school!" Chapter 2. Shinso has always believed that if you tried your hardest, you could prevail. It would never be as easy as it was for certain other people, but with sufficient effort and perseverance, you could overcome the difficulties that pull you down. The entrance exam for UA, however, is also teaching him the value of opportunity. He doesn't know who that green-haired kid is, but he's tearing through the testing robots like All Might through a mob of villains. He's also leaving behind a lot of robots that are badly damaged but not quite out. It may not be very heroic to bludgeon wounded enemies to death with a piece of rebar with a concrete chunk on the end, but it's the only chance he has. His quirk is utterly and completely useless against robots. He's not even sure if what he's doing counts as points, but he's out of options, and something that might work is better than nothing that won't. How many points does he have? Assuming he's actually earning any. 20? 30? He's lost count. 30-ish is probably closest to the mark. He passed by the shattered remains of a giant robot without a word. He can scarcely believe it when he gets the package from UA that delivers the news he was hoping for, but he never believed he'd actually get it. Class 1A is a name that triggers no alarm bells or a subconscious terror. That won't last for long. How could you guys do this to me? You're lucky we're doing this at all, grape shit, Bakugo growled. I still think we should run you down with a bus after the stunt you pulled the last loop. But... Mina's eyes darted his way, and he looked around at his classmates arrayed in front of him. You too, Kaminari? Kaminari grimaced. Sorry, dude, but I'm with them on this one. That was not cool, man. Look, Izuku interrupted before Mineta could protest further. It's just general education. We're not sending you to do hard labor in the salt mines. Prove you can better yourself and we'll let you join in the next group. If you don't, he added as Mineta opened his mouth again, Aizawa-sensei will have to get involved. That shut him up. If you asked Shinso to describe the experience of being part of Class 1A, he would say it was like being at a theater play. A weird one. And he was the only one who didn't have a script. It wasn't as if they were ostracizing him. They were actually great people, willing to help and accept him into their groups. But he couldn't help shake the feeling that he was in the middle of a gigantic inside joke, and that he was the only one that wasn't in on it. Are you sure we should be doing this? Hey, Saros shrugged. Aizawa-sensei was very clear. We can do anything we want for the class project so long as we don't get arrested. Shinso raised an eyebrow. And we won't get arrested if we don't get caught, Kaminari explained. Now pass me the wire cutters. All right, Aizawa said from his place at the front of the class. They've finished totaling the damages. He turned around and began writing figures on the board. In 5th place, we have Asui, with just over 5 million yen. In 4th, we have Oyama, with 3,500,000 yen. In 3rd, we have Sero, with 3 million yen. 2nd is Koda with 1,500,000, and in 1st place, it goes to Shinso with. He peered closer at the clipboard in his hands, who somehow managed to make it through the whole assignment without damaging anything. A round of applause burst from the class. How'd you do it? Someone shouted. I hid under a car with a bunch of kids until the screaming stopped. Aizawa checked something on his clipboard and shrugged. Protected bystanders. It counts. We are going to jail for this. Shinso breathed through his mouth and tried not to panic. They are going to hunt us down and toss us in Tartarus. We will never see the light of daylight again. Shut up and shovel! Bakugo snarled. It's very disconcerting to wake up in a different bed than the one you fell asleep in. Thankfully, he recognizes his room at home, and the bed he's lying in is the same one he's been sleeping on since he was 5. It's a much better alternative than, say, a roadside ditch or a cot in a prison holding cell. The faintly alarming part is that when he went to bed last night, it was in his room at the UA dorms. Had he been drinking or something last night? He doesn't smell like booze or feel hungover. He does, however, feel like he just escaped from being trapped in a cement mixer. Thanks to his classmates, he knows exactly what that feels like. What time is it anyway? He grabs his phone and turns it on. Weird. He thought he'd gotten rid of his old phone when his parents got him a new one to celebrate him getting into UA. According to his phone, it's 8:15 in the morning. It is also, according to the date, nearly half a month before the UA entrance exams. That can't be right. He fumbles around for his new phone. He can't find it. When he turns on his computer, it shows the same date. The X'd-off boxes on the calendar on his wall corroborate this. He's not sure what he expects when he looks out the window, but at least everything still looks normal. Except that his parents had that little dead lilac bush out front cleared away just after the sports festival at UA. Mom, what date is it? June 16th. What year? 2235. Why? Weird dream threw me off. He's panicking now. What in the hell is going on? He grabs his phone and flips open the contacts. Of course, none of his classmates are in there. That was on his new phone. So he dials the first number that comes to mind that he can still remember. Hello? Midoriya, is that you? What the hell is going on? Who is this? This is Midoriya Izuku, right? It's me, Shinso, from school. Who? There's no Shinzo in my class. How do you know my name? Sorry, I must have the wrong number. He hangs up and barely suppresses a scream. That was Midoriya. He recognized the voice, but Midoriya hadn't recognized him. Panic is gnawing at the edges of his mind as he dials the only other numbers he remembers. Hello? Yaoyorozu, it's Shinso. Please tell me you remember me. The scream that came out of the phone nearly deafened him. I'm sorry! Yaoyorozu sounds nearly as panicked as him. But Shinso? That's really you? What's going on? That's what I was going to ask you. What's happening? The last thing I remember is going to bed in the dorms. And when I woke up, the next morning I'm back at home and my phone is saying I've gone back in time. I've already called Midoriya and he didn't recognize me. It's a time loop, Yaoyorozu hastily explains. We've been repeating our first year, but it's always been... You've never looped with us before. A time loop? That actually explained a lot. The panic began to recede from his brain. What about Midoriya? He had no idea who I was when I called him. We all loop back to different points, Yaoyorozu explained. It seemed like she was calming down too. Midoriya doesn't come back until just before the entrance exam. We have some theories to why that is, but nothing really concrete. Oh God, you say you called him? Yeah. Sorry, I was freaking out and he was the first number I could remember. Is that going to... No, you're not going to destroy time or anything like that. Time is apparently a lot more robust than some sci-fi writers give it credit for. It's just that, well, Midoriya gets kind of weird when he suspects there's something going on that he's not aware of. What do you mean? Midoriya stared at his phone in confusion. That had been one weird call. Out of curiosity, he redialed the number. Busy signal. Interesting. He reached over and grabbed the black notebook off the nightstand. Notes and papers bulged out of its sides. Got strange call at 8:34, June 16th. Caller knew my full name. Said his name was Shinso. Seemed to expect me to know who he was. Said something about being in the same class. Possible connection to what happened to Kachan. He turned on his computer and began searching the name Shinso across various social media sites. He spared a rueful glance at his overflowing notebook. If this new development panned out, he was going to need a better way of organizing his data. That big corkboard that belonged to his dad would work great. Now that he thought about it, he wondered if his mom had any red string left. He does a lot better in the exams this time. For one, he didn't follow in Izuku's wake, bludgeoning damaged robots to death with a piece of concrete. His quirk is still worthless against robots, of course, but apparently cooperating points were a big thing. It was also a new feeling to find himself a true part of the group now, instead of just this weird bystander that's been allowed to observe them. It's a nice kind of feeling, actually. Except there's something wrong. So, Mineta hasn't looped? It's strange seeing how sudden the change is from the boy who had been following Shinso around with a notebook and stalking his social media profiles, to the classmate he remembers from his first loop. Question: who's Mineta? He used to be in the loop with us, Yayorozu explained. He was one of our classmates, but he didn't make it through the practical exam in the last loop, and so he got shuffled to general education. There is more to it than that, but Shinso doesn't ask. He's kind of scared to find out. Have I met him before? I didn't even know what he looks like. Small guy, Ochako indicated, waist height. Got purple hair that forms into these balls on the top of his head. Kind of a perv, too. Oh, him. Shinso remembers him from the last loop now that he thinks about it. He was always glaring at Shinso whenever he saw him and seemed to bear some kind of grudge against him. That made sense now. So he hasn't looped yet? No. Izuku rubbed at the back of his head. He didn't recognize any of us. He should have looped already. Tried to grab my ass during the exam too, Jiro hissed. He knows better. At least he used to. Now that he thought about it, Shinso had also seen someone wheeled out of the exam on a stretcher with gauze stuffed in their ears. Actually, he should have looped back around the same time you did, Yayorozu added. Everyone turned to look at Shinso. You think I somehow took his place? That makes the most sense, Ida said. It's always been the entire class. When Mineta wasn't part of the class anymore, he was no longer applied to the time loop. And now that I'm a part of the class, it applies to me too? Well, Izuku said, in any case, we should probably make this formal. He gave Shinso a smile. Sorry for leaving you in the dark this long like that. Welcome to Class 1A. Chapter 3. It starts during the second attack of the sludge villain. It's a quick thing. Midoriya is just turning around to follow after All Might when he catches a glimpse of Kacchan out of the corner of his eye. He has this strange expression on his face. It's not rage. Midoriya knows that face well. He's not sure what it is. Neither, he suspects, does Kacchan. Then Kacchan notices he's watching. Midoriya braces for the anger. Except it doesn't happen. Instead, he gives a small two-fingered salute. Thanks. That's when Midoriya knows, beyond any doubt, that something is horribly wrong. Kacchan has changed. There's no doubt about it. He's still Kacchan, just Kacchan that acts like he's on medication for rage problems. And he's not on medication. Midoriya checked. Hey, Deku! The train station is crowded, packed wall to wall with commuters rushing to and from platforms. Midoriya only barely hears his nickname being called out amongst the noise, but he does, and it's enough to have his phone brought up on reflex. He doesn't even remember snapping the picture, or even seeing the person he was photographing, but when he's finally free of the crowd, he glances down at the picture he's taken. There's a girl, waving her hand above the heads of the crowd. Bright brown hair cut straight, with wide brown eyes, a wide smile, and pink pads on the tips of her fingers. She's cute. Normally, his mind would be overloading just trying to process the idea of a cute girl, or any girl for that matter, who would actually talk to him. But there's a mystery to solve right now. He's already singled out her face and is running through the picture through the image recognition software on his phone. Ochako Uraraka. Huh. There's a boy waiting outside the school for him. He has this burn scar on half his face, and hair that's half red, half white, split right down the middle. I'll be waiting for when you remember, is all he says before turning around and walking in the direction of the train station. The birds outside his bedroom window spell out, "Hello." Izuku is already prowling the internet for people with animal control quirks. There's being stalked, and then there's being stalked by Midoriya. Despite the fact he's been following Yaoyorozu for 3 hours now, writing in his notebook and muttering furiously, he still gives the impression of a stray puppy that's decided to trust you and follow you home. Plus, it's hard to feel threatened by someone whom you've known for years, metaphysically, and whom you've learned to trust. Problem is that he knows about her in the first place. She has studiously avoided having any contact with Midoriya before he looped back on the day of the entrance exam. He shouldn't have any reason to follow her at all, except he's here, holding a magazine, trying to pretend he's engrossed in reading it as he follows her down the street. She's not the only one either. Ida, Jiro, Kaminari, and Sero have all had Izuku either message them out of the blue or show up at their school or home. Even Aizawa-sensei had Midoriya knock on his apartment door. He had been in the middle of catching up on his sleep, so he had answered the door with a, "What do you want this time, Midoriya?" She glanced behind her through the reflection of a store window. Midoriya had ditched the magazine and was now typing something onto his phone. They really needed to stop doing this. "I know, this looks crazy." Toshinori blinked as he took in the mess of photos and notes pinned on his prodigy's wall. There was a lot of information here, arranged in a way that brought to mind the digital layouts he had seen on Tsukauchi and the other members of the police force use when they're trying to lay out evidence and connect it with suspects and timelines. "What exactly am I looking at, my boy?" he asked, his eyes darting this way and that as he tried to piece together what was going on. "There's been strange things going on," Izuku admitted. "Just after you saved me and Kachan from the sledge villain, things changed. Kachan began acting weird, and while he swears there's nothing wrong, I also started running into people who I'd never met, but who seem to know me, and who keep making weird references to remembering me. I managed to talk to a few of their parents, and a few of them admitted that there had also been a sudden change for no apparent reason." Yes, Toshinori could see it now. Each note of the chart was devoted to specific people, along with lists detailing who they are, important facts about them, and documenting encounters with young Midoriya. Red string highlighting connections between various people along with facts that they had in common. One strand even looped around the entire board in a circle. Apparently, they were all around young Midoriya's age. Interesting. I've got some theories about what's going on. I haven't been able to verify any of them. Look, I know this looks crazy. Yes, he could sort of see how young Midoriya would be worried about him giving off that impression. Still, this was an impressive display of investigation. The police force would welcome someone like Midoriya with open arms. If he hadn't already chosen the boy to be his successor, he would be pushing him into considering a career in the police. More to the point, "I think you may be actually onto something here, my boy." Kirishima had just looped back. Bakugo was already waiting on his doorstep with a game console and a bag of snacks. They were just on the 7th round of All-Star Melee when the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Midoriya standing on the front step, clutching a notebook to his chest. "It's a time loop, isn't it? You're my future classmates from UA, and we're stuck in a time loop." Whatever Kirishima was going to say was drowned out by the sound of Bakugo sucking half a granola bar into his lungs. Well, time to find out if this is true or I'm crazy. Midoriya looked down at the hair in his hand. The innocuous piece of hair that supposedly was supposed to give him the chance to achieve his dream and prove once and for all whether or not the whole time loop thing was an elaborate joke being played on him by Kacchan and a bunch of strangers. Toshinori, sitting there off to the side, can't help but wonder the same thing. It seems insane on the surface, but he's faced a lot of insane things during his career. Time quirks are certainly nothing new, and a time loop isn't impossible. Not probable, but by no means impossible. The evidence certainly points to it being real, but you can also never discount the possibility of a trick. Midoriya swallows the hair. Then his face changes. At first, it's this blank, kind of shocked look, like someone had just come up to him and slapped him across the face with a fish. Then comes the look of dawning horror. Ugh! I told them to stop doing this! Chapter 4. A tactful person might describe Shoto Todoroki's relationship with his father as complex. That is to say, it was mostly antagonistic, with confusing jumble of familial feelings and expectations mixed in. On a calm day, Shoto would say he hated his father, but he didn't want him dead or anything. The problem was that when he looped back, it wasn't on a calm day. It was on the day his special admission into UA went through. His father, in response, had dragged him out of bed in the early hours of the morning for an extra grueling training session. So he's never calm when he loops back. In fact, he's practically boiling over with barely suppressed anger and resentment. Sometimes he keeps his cool and avoids making a scene. Sometimes. Most of the time, he lashes back with everything he has picked up during the many, many loops they have gone through. He's even put his dad into the intensive care ward at the hospital a couple 100 times. He had actually been doing pretty good these last few loops. The worst he had done was cracked a few ribs. Looking back, that might have been part of the problem. The fact that the last loop hadn't gone well likely contributed. In any case, he's already riled up before he even finishes opening his eyes to greet the new loop. It's like there's an elastic band stretched inside him that's getting tighter and tighter with each grueling exercise his dad puts him through. Then they start the sparring, and the elastic band inside him just snaps. Midoriya Izuku probably should be in bed right now. But it's Saturday night, his mom is out with her friends, and he honestly has nothing better to do. So that means another late night prowling the hero fan boards and watching videos of hero fights. He's not expecting the doorbell to ring. His mom isn't due back for another couple of hours, and she has a key. There's a boy, standing on the front step. He's got a burn scar across half his face, and his hair is split down the middle, half white, half red. Ash and blood are smeared across his clothes, and he smells like a campfire. I just killed my dad. Bakugo Katsuki is in bed right now. He's, in fact, in the middle of a deep sleep when his phone rings. His mind is understandably fuzzy when he grabs his phone off the nightstand and answers. What the fuck do you want? Kacchan? Hey, it's Izuku! Do you know someone with red and white hair and a burn scar on their face? Yeah, fucking half and half. What about him? He's at my house. He said he just killed his dad. What? The first thing Shoto's sleepy mind registers is that this is not his bedroom. His father would never have allowed this much All Might merch anywhere near his house. There's also Bakugo standing by the bed, glaring down at him. You really fuck things up this time, half and half, he snarled. I wasn't planning on killing. Not that! Bakugo snapped. "We all figured you'd flip and murder the bastard one day. You just had to fucking go and run and make Deku's house the first fucking place you headed." "Why is that?" And then it clicked. The entrance exam is still a week away. Exactly! I had to tell Deku that you were time-traveling heroes, using a quirk to prevent your dad from becoming a villain and destroying Japan. He had to lie to his fucking mom, too. She thinks you're a friend of Deku's who's having family problems. What now? We've got some bloody clothes to burn, Bakugo scoffed. Deku is getting some hair dye, and photocopier said she would be over with the disguise for you. His hair had been dyed black and styled so that it covered his burn scar. Yagurozu had given him a new set of clothes that included a hoodie, a leather jacket, and a pair of loose pants, along with a wad of bills she had pulled out of her thigh. He didn't look like Todoroki Shoto, Endeavor's prodigal son, anymore. He looked kind of like Dabi, actually. A large hand clapped down on his shoulder from behind him, and he turned to catch sight of the grinning face decorated with piercings and cosmetic skin grafts. "Hey, little brother. Heard you were in a bit of trouble." Dabi's grin was radiating in the same kind of smug satisfaction you'd expect to see in a cat that has finally figured out how to open the birdcage. "Congratulations. I wish I had been there to see you crush the bastard." One would have thought sharing an apartment/hideaway with Himiko Toga would have been involved being stabbed a lot more. He had only been stabbed once since Dabi brought him here, and that had involved a cockroach and his arm being in the way. What he had also hadn't expected was the sudden feeling of loneliness. It's an old, familiar feeling, but one that he hasn't really felt since the time loops began. Time looping has brought the class closer in a way that nothing else really could, and it had driven away the loneliness. He likes and trusts the people of his class like no one else in his life. Only now he's suddenly apart from them because he decided to crush his dad under a fiery glacier. What are they doing right now anyway? It's been ages since he had to wonder that. It was at that moment his phone buzzed with a message. "You killed your dad?" "Ah, yes. It's the entrance exam day today." Aizawa finished up the roll call, dutifully checking off yet another absent for Todoroki before snapping the file closed. Having gotten in on special recommendations before the regular exam, Todoroki Shoto was on a card-carrying member of Class 1A. The fact that he had yet to actually show up for class and was wanted by the police in connection to his father being crushed under a localized glacier didn't actually remove his name from the class roster. And if administration had neglected to do that, he wasn't going to bring it to their attention. "All right," he announced. "You guys know the drill. Pick a class president. I don't care how you do it, etc., etc. Wake me up when it's over." He shuffled out of the class, closing the door behind him. Midoriya stood up. "Guys, I think there's only one person in this class who deserves the honor of this title." "What are you doing?" Shoto looked up from his tablet. "I've been elected class president. My classmates have been sending me everything I need to do for the job." The look Dabi gave him was impossible to describe, at least if you were Shoto. Most people would call it mildly worried. "You're on the run from the law. You haven't shown up for a single day of class." "Exactly. They figured I'll have a lot of time on my hands." "We should have gotten you out of the house years ago." One thing Shoto had not been expecting from being on the run from the law was how utterly boring it was. He had already started to get a sense of why exactly his brother and Toga had joined the League of Villains. He had only been hiding out in this apartment for 2 weeks and had already burning the world was looking appealing. He had already read all the books in the apartment, including the owner's manual for the rice cooker. He had exhausted the capacity of the internet to relieve boredom about 200 loops ago, and was currently amusing himself by testing whether or not it was possible to prevent a pot of water from boiling on the stove through continued observation. Toga and Dabi, for their part, were waging their own fight against boredom by engaging in their 2,642nd round of high-speed stab scotch on the table. And it looks like they were finished with that round now. "What should we do next?" Dabi asked as they bandaged his hand. "Let's rob a bank." He had been kidding when he suggested it. Everything was on fire. Someone was screaming about being stabbed. Burst pipes were spraying water everywhere, which was not actually helping to put out the fires. It had all been going right to plan until Dabi's piercing set off the metal detector and Toga had responded by shanking a security guard with a ballpoint pen. Shoto created a ramp of ice, shouldering the duffel bag full of money, and ducked out the window, sliding to a perfect stop safely on the ground. The heroes were already responding. No surprise, they couldn't possibly have missed the cloud of black smoke coming from the building, or the bursts of blue fire that were still erupting from the windows. It took him a while to recognize the hero waiting for him at the bottom of the ramp. Rock Roller was a minor hero with a big ego, a chip on his shoulder, and a petty sense of resentment against anyone who looked like they might possibly overshadow him. That apparently included new interns who were just looking for someone to show them the ropes. "Ah, you," he said, his left side flaring with fire. "Just as we planned." He was being sarcastic when he said it. "Guess what? We made the news!" It was old news to Shoto. His classmates had sent him messages drawing his attention to the blaring headline, which stated that maniac teenagers had burned down a bank in the middle of Centro Crostano in broad daylight. Not to mention curb-stomping said teenagers had delivered to a local pro-hero Rock Roller, who had responded to the emergency. "They're saying we might be in the same league as Stain!" Toga continued, letting out an excited squeal and hugging her phone to her chest. "We're not in the same league as Stain," Shoto replied. An idea was forming in his head. "We can do better than him." It was a night of regrets for the turbo hero Ingenium. They ranged in size from big ones, like the fact he didn't tell Tenya how proud of him he was, to small ones, such as the regret he never got around to replacing that ugly coffee table in his apartment. All of them, however, centered on one key regret, that he had gone hunting for Stain alone. It happened so fast. One moment, all had been peaceful, then suddenly he had been stabbed. He turned around in time just to catch Stain licking the blood from his knife. And just like that, he couldn't move. That had been bad enough. Then someone called out, "Hey, that hero is ours!" And suddenly he found himself caught in a battle royale between Stain, a teenage girl with a knife, an older boy with a flame quirk. Two of the three new villains that had been targeting heroes for the past few weeks. All he could do was lie helpless on the ground while the three of them battled it out. If he could just shake off Stain's quirk, then maybe he had a chance. He couldn't win this battle, but if he could escape to safety, that was a victory in on itself. At the very least, he could provide some information on how Stain was defeating his victims. A pair of arms hooked under his arms and began dragging him away from the battle. He couldn't move his neck, but he was able to flop his head in such a way he could see who was carrying him. "Hello, villain number 3, Todoroki Shoto, Endeavor's son, who according to the media had snapped under his father's overbearing expectations, crushing said father under a miniature glacier that still hadn't melted, and ran off to become a villain." "Are you going to kill me now?" "No, we only go after assholes. You're cool." He propped Tensei up behind a dumpster and began covering him with bags of garbage. "Stain's quirk should wear off in a couple of minutes. Try to stay hidden. Once we take care of Stain, I'll tell them you got away. Get yourself somewhere safe as soon as we're clear." "You planned this?" Tensei gasped. He had to have. The lot of them had been in the same place at the same time. It couldn't be a coincidence. But this whole dragging him off and hiding him suggested something planned. Why? Todoroki shrugged. "Your little brother would kill me if I didn't." Even after all the loops he's gone through, Shoto still hasn't figured out what to think of his mom. Like his dad, his relationship is complicated to say the least. But at least he's never had the overwhelming urge to crush her with a glacier. He's also never visited his mom with his older brother either. "You've dyed your hair, both of you." Their mom is looking between the two of them, probably trying to digest how much they've changed since the last time she saw them. "I like it." It made them look less like their dad after all. "What's been happening with you two?" "Right. Mom didn't watch the news, did she?" "They're going well," he answered. "I've been elected class president." "That's wonderful, Shoto. What about you, dear?" she asked, turning towards Dabi. "Well..." It was at that moment the door burst open and Togo ran into the room. She had a scalpel in one hand and blood splattered across the nurse's uniform she was wearing. "I just made a new friend!" "Sorry, Mom," Dabi said, getting up from his chair. "We need to leave now." They bolted for the window as the sounds of police sirens started to become audible. "All right, you little shithead kid! Who the fuck are you, and what the fuck did you do to our boss?" It was hard to tell with the plague doctor mask over his face, but Shoto suspects Shin Namato is extremely pissed off at him. Even more so than he normally would be if he had just discovered Eri was missing and there was some strange teenager trying to sneak her out of their secured compound. He shrugged. "I'm a time-traveling hero from the future. We've replaced your boss with a shape-shifting teenager serial killer and intend to drive your organization into the ground before my compatriots got bored and decided to wipe you off the map." He shrugged. "We've had a lot of practice." It's hard to read expressions with a plague doctor mask, but Shin has gone quiet. "What can I say? It's the truth." There's the kind of awkward when a good friend walks in on you when you're in the middle of doing something illegal. And then there's the kind of awkward when said best friend is also in the middle of doing something completely unrelated, but equally illegal. "Vigilantism again, Izuku." Izuku gives a nervous laugh and adjusts his grip on the villain he was currently throttling. "Armed robberies, Shoto!" "It pays the bills." Shoto shrugged. "I didn't see you. You didn't see us." "Sounds fair," Izuku replied. He gave the villain one last squeeze to make sure he was unconscious. "See you later!" And then he was gone, in a green blur. "Who the hell was that?" Dabi asked, hefting his bag of money over his shoulder. "He's like All Might, only worse," Shoto replied. "We're better off not messing with him." "Is he the one with the people time traveling with you?" Toga asked. Chapter 5. Kurogiri is not one of those villains who seek the spotlight. He actively avoids it if he can. Notoriety is all well and good, but the brighter you shine, the more cops look your way. The cops can't target you if they don't know you exist, and he's been careful about there being nothing to link the villain Kurogiri to his more mundane identity. That's why it's a very unwelcome surprise when he gets an email. And it's not from All for One. He doesn't know who it is, the names are not familiar, and probably fake in any case. And they definitely know who he is. They want to hire him and his quirk for a mission. They apparently want him to rescue this little girl from a high-security facility, which he knows basically means they want to kidnap someone else's daughter/niece/little sister to use as leverage. They even have the exact coordinates he needs for his quirk, a list of the best times for him to find her alone, the promise that he will never have to worry about the cops will bust his bar, which he doesn't believe, along with the assurance that it'll only take about 5 minutes and he won't have to listen to Shigaraki rant about how the latest bosses in his game is a cheap-ass little bitch. It's likely a trap. It probably is far more than it appears, and it's definitely a bad idea. His eyes dart over to where Shigaraki is parked in front of the TV, a game controller in his hand, swearing and cursing at the characters on the screen. But god damn it, did they make a persuasive argument. For Eri, hope is black mist and a dark portal opening up in her room. There's 2 14-year-old girls waiting for him when he gets to the meeting place, a fenced-off construction site. One of them greets Eri by name and introduces herself as Ochako, then gives her a blanket and a candy apple before leading her off somewhere. Obviously, she was someone chosen to be non-threatening to keep the girl from freaking out and making a scene. The other girl, a small thing with what appears to be audio jacks dangling from her earlobes, couldn't quite be explained off in the same way. She, to Kurogiri's surprise, produced a wad of bills. "Here's your payment, as promised." Kurogiri quickly counted the money. Everything he had been promised indeed. Well, except, "How do you propose to make it so I will never have to worry about the cops raiding my bar?" "Oh, that's easy. Now that we've wiped out the League, there's nothing really to draw attention to your place. Don't worry," she added. "We made sure Shigaraki had left your bar before we thrashed him." What? It was at that moment the earth shook. Kurogiri first thought it was an earthquake. Then he saw a pillar of a fiery mushroom cloud in the sky, in the vague direction of Yukumarsha. The girl nodded grimly. "You can never be too careful with All for One. Usually, overkill is the best policy. If that doesn't finish him off, we'll have to send in Midoriya." It's not often the home phone in the Todoroki household rings, and the callers can usually be divided up into 3 categories. People looking to either reach Endeavor or Fuyumi for work reasons, telemarketers, and fans of Endeavor who somehow got their hands on his phone number. So Fuyumi has no reason to expect anything different when the phone rings and she goes to answer it. "Hello?" "Hello." The caller on the other end is a woman. The Fuyumi doesn't recognize the voice. "Is this the Todoroki household?" Probably not a fan, then. Something for work? "Yes, this is the Todoroki residence." "Am I speaking to Shoto's mom?" "What?" No, I'm Shoto's big sister." "Oh, can I speak to your mother, then?" The only people who would ask about their mother are people who already know she can't be reached here. She's not living with us right now. She's been sick for a while." "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can I speak to your father, then?" Does this woman not know who her father is? "He's also not here. He had an accident, is in the hospital right now." An accident that involved lots of ice, fire, and falling down in a flight of punches. Well, maybe you can still help me. Have you noticed your little brother undergo any sort of strange, sudden change in personality lately? Like within the last year or so?" "Well, he suddenly snapped and sent our father to the hospital after giving him frostbite and breaking every bone in his body. But we all figured that was." "What about new friends? Is he suddenly best friends with people who have been complete strangers months ago?" "Well, Shoto never really had any friends." Father wouldn't let him. Except there had been this Uraraka girl stopping by after Shoto had put their father in the hospital. She had said she was an online friend of Shoto's. Shoto had mentioned he was meeting up with someone named Midoriya, whom she had never met before. "Is he suddenly busy with some kind of project or plan and he gets evasive when you ask him what he's doing?" "No, well, except..." It had been in the middle of the night. She had woken up needing to use the bathroom. Shoto had been half out the window, dressed in all black, a sword sheathed at his hip, and a bandolier of what looked like grenades strapped across his chest. "There's a raccoon in the garbage," had been his explanation. "Look, you're not the only one who has had something like this happen to someone they love. A group of us are going to be meeting this Friday to talk about it. You're welcome to join us." "Well, we've rented a room at the Mustafa Community Center. Just ask for Midoriya's group. We have cookies." "Right, so that Stain, Overhaul, that woman with the tentacles, Kill Smasher, those Neo-Stain guys, that mailman with the razor paper quirk, and of course, the near entirety of the League of Villains." Izuku looked up from his notebook. "I think that's everyone now." Preemptive total annihilation was not considered a practical crime prevention method, or even a sane one, for that matter. But if that's what it took to have a normal school year, then that's what they were going to do. Plus, Kurogiri's bar made a good place to meet up away from prying eyes of parents, teachers, police officers, and intelligence agents who would all ask stupid questions. Kurogiri, for his part, just gave them the key to the back door, let them use one of the upstairs rooms, and told them he didn't want to know what they were up to. Just don't break anything. "Right," Izuku continued. "Now that they're all taken care of, we can move on to more important things. Any ideas of what we want to do for the cultural festival this loop?" There really was cookies. Fumi nibbled on a ginger snap shaped like All Might as she listened to Kirishima's dad speak. "And then one day he dyes his hair red, and before the dye has even dried, there's this kid I've never seen before in my life knocking on the door saying he's Ejiro's friend, and Ejiro greets him like they've been buddies for years. And after that," Kirishima's father added, "he starts coming home in the middle of the night smelling like smoke and suddenly knows how to pick locks." He ran a hand through his black hair. "It's not manly to dump our problems onto strangers, but we have no idea what to do here." "Don't worry, we're all going through the same thing," Midoriya's mother said, patting Kirishima's dad on the arm. "We're all in this together." It's not that Izuku dislikes Mei. She's very skilled as a support technician, and her devices are extremely useful. But she's also a bit of a loose cannon with no regard for personal boundaries. But she doesn't ask stupid questions like, "Why do you need 20 sets of motorized climbing equipment and a microwave receiver?" Excuse me, you're Hatsume Mei, right?" "Sorry?" Mei said, brushing past him. "I don't have time to talk. I have work to do." "Wait, we want to commission something from you. Form T2 things." Mei froze in mid-step. There was this kind of odd, manic gleam in her eyes when she turned towards Izuku. "I always knew time travelers would come looking for my services. What do you need?" "Those Class 1A bastards are up to something." It had only been a week, and already Class 1B had collectively learned to tune out most of what Monoma said, if it involved Class 1A. The government, organized religion, and the overuse of turnips in the cafeteria lunch menu. But he also kind of had a point this time. Class 1A was definitely up to something. They had all started wearing dark glasses and small ear sets. They had also started standing around, either watching people or pointing strange instruments with microphones at windows of various classrooms. "They're watching us right now, too," Iriba added, gesturing to the table in the far corner of the cafeteria. Everyone turned to the direction she indicated. 5 sets of newspapers snapped up to cover faces, which did nothing to encourage the kids of Class 1B. They could all see the eye holes cut out of them after all. "And then he starts showing me all these outfits for little girls, asking what I thought of them," President Mike explained.
They were all hideous, of course. Then I asked him why he needed to know, and he said his niece was staying with him, and she was going to need new clothes. He doesn't even have siblings, let alone a niece. I mean, I don't think it's anything nefarious. He's done stuff like this before when he got jobs from witness protection. But there's so many other things going on. He's seemingly ignoring his class. Not that they need it. They're acing all of their other classes, and he's doing his other classes like normal. But it's very out of character for him. I mean, I can sort of see Eri taking up some of his time, but he already doesn't get enough sleep.
Wait, Inko interrupted. Is Eri about 6 years old, has stark white hair and a single bronze horn poking out of her forehead about here? She gestured to the side of her head.
Yeah, exactly,
Mike explained.
You know her?
Well, not exactly, Inko explained. I got home early one day and Zuko was in the kitchen with this little girl, showing her how to make candy apples. He said her name was Eri and he was doing a Big Brothers and Sisters program through the school.
We had something similar happen, Jiro's mom added. Our daughter brought home this little girl one day and started teaching her how to play guitar. When we asked, she said she was the little sister of one of her classmates. None of you have a little girl like that, right?
Everyone in the room shook their head. It had been a normal day for Class 1B. Then Jiro fell through the ceiling. Vlad King had nearly attacked her until he realized who it was. He almost did, even then. Jiro wasn't wearing her school uniform. Instead, she had on a plain black suit, along with dark glasses and earpieces Class 1A had taken to wearing. She was also surrounded by bits of ceiling tile and... Were those listening devices? Jiro climbed to her feet, brushing pieces of the ceiling off her clothes, then grabbed the listening device. Your pipes need fixing. Then she just left. We're worried about Class 1A. Nezu looked up from his paperwork at the teachers assembled in front of his desk. What brought this on? They're up to something. They're not even trying to hide it. They're even baiting everyone about it, Vlad King said. Monima is literally frothing at the mouth trying to figure out what it is. Not to mention, I have a major suspicion none of them are doing any schoolwork, and Aizawa is letting them get away with it, Midnight added. They're passing their tests, Nezu pointed out, and getting all their assignments done. And they shouldn't be. They're treating every assignment like they already know the perfect solution ahead of time. I would have suspected cheating, except cheating to this degree would involve far more resources and time than any group of persons in this entire school has. Well, time travelers like them have no shortage of time, Nezu mused. But I think in this case it's a matter more of continued repetition and practice rather than any attempt to subvert the system. Unavoidable, really. He took on the teacher's gobsmacked looks. Right. I keep forgetting it's not obvious to most people. So, when Kotsky got home, he immediately heads to the fridge and eats the last of the yogurt, Bakugo Masura explained. Then Mixie comes in and they get into an argument about consideration for other people in the house. Eating food because it goes bad, putting labels on things. While they're arguing, Kotsky's friends rush into the house, up the stairs, and begin hauling things out of Kotsky's room. I counted at least 3 large crates, a potted plant, a steel table, and a large rolled-up carpet, not to mention several duffel bags they kept bringing back in and reloading. They had just finished hauling the last item out when Kotsky yells, "Fine, I won't touch the fucking yogurt," and storms out the door after them. That little shit, Mitsuki muttered. It had been a whim. Gentle would admit that. Breaking into a high school cultural festival was hardly the sort of feat that would burn his name into the annals of history. But a part of him would always wanted to see the inside of the UA campus for himself. Plus, their media ratings had been on a downward trend recently, They could do another video of them robbing a convenience store, or they could mix things up a little. La Brava had hacked into UA's network and made them both fake guest passes. Those had gotten them through the gate. Once that was done, everyone apparently assumed that if they were there, they must have had clearance. Gentle suspected that as long as he didn't draw too much attention to himself, like, say, by going up to one of the many famous heroes around and asking for an interview, they would probably leave him alone. Besides, this was actually turning out to be kind of fun.
I can't believe they don't have candy apples here, La Brava complained,
panning the camera around to show off more of the festival.
Most disgraceful, Gentle agreed. What should we attend to next?
Well, Class 1A's got a booth nearby, La Brava replied,
pointing to a small map tacked onto a post.
Apparently it's some kind of fortune-telling booth.
The trio of black vans parked in the spot did not look like a fortune-teller booth. They looked like a shady government stakeout, an image not helped by the array of antennas and radio dishes bolted to the roof of one of them, or the students standing around in black suits and sunglasses, casting suspicious looks at everyone. Blocky white letters on a sign of one of the vans just said, Fortunes.
It's spy-themed, apparently, Gentle remarked.
So, you 1A bastards think you're oh so great because you fit fluorescent lights into a two-way mirror into a van?
Monoma sneered. On the other side of the steel table, Ashido remained silent. She just held out her hand and accepted the folder Ida handed to her.
You think you're so high and mighty with your listening devices and secret code words, but we're on to you. You won't get the better of us. Did you say that when you wet the bed that overnight class trip when you were 7?
Monoma's mouth snapped shut.
What about when you put that baseball through old lady Tamako's window? You never did tell your parents about that, did you?
How did you know?
Mina smiled.
We know everything about you, Neteo Monoma.
Izuku had to give Yagirosu credit. She had done an excellent job on Eri's little suit and dark glasses. Eri wasn't in on the joke, of course, but she seemed to be happy enough to copy what her adopted older siblings were doing, and more importantly, she was having fun. At the moment, they were sitting at a picnic table, and Eri was nibbling on the candy apple he had brought for her. The booth was turning out to be surprisingly popular, and there was even a line. Actually, now that he looked, the line hadn't moved in 15 minutes. What was Mina doing in there?
We knew what you were doing from the moment you started doing it, Mina said. The only difference is whether or not you'll confess. Believe me, you will regret it if you make things difficult for us.
I confess!
Monoma shrieked, huddling in his uncomfortable steel chair. He had absolutely no idea what he was confessing to. Neither did Mina.
Well, the sports festival was apparently a success,
Sarah said as they all sat down at the lunch table.
At least 2/3 of the school is now jittery in our presence, and at least half are convinced we actually do work for a secret world conspiracy.
Now that the festival was over, they had ditched the dark glasses and the whole charade of pretending they hadn't already gathered all the information they needed 2 whole loops ago. It was back to being normal students for them. For some reason, that made people even more uneasy.
So, what do you guys have planned for the rest of the school year? I was just planning on laying back and relaxing for...
A great primeval roar suddenly erupted from the direction of the ocean, with enough force to make the entire building shake.
Fucking mother of monsters! Bakugo growled.
I knew we forgot someone, Izuku groaned.
Hi, Mom!
Izuku burst into the house and raced up the stairs to his room, not even bothering to wait for his mom's reply. Mother of monsters. Of all the villain groups they had forgotten to wipe up before the school year had started, it had to be the Nutband terrorists
who were trying to distinguish themselves by raising gigantic sea life with powerful and unusual quirks. In their defense, they had only really had to deal with the Mother of Monsters twice before. Usually the group was stomped down by larger and more powerful groups, like the Eight Precepts or the League of Villains, or was busted by the cops in the wake of the increased security put in place by escalating villain attacks. Regardless, they were still a dangerous group to deal with, especially when they had gotten the chance to raise one of their monsters to full adulthood. No taking chances. Izuku stuffed 2 bandoliers of syringe darts into his bag, along with an extra-large bottle of monster tranks. That was immediately followed by the first aid kit, the emergency surgery kit, and the "we'll sew you back together later" kit. There was also the rocket-propelled grenades, and a bunch of flower crowns, and the cage of mice. He also grabbed the leveler from its spot on his dresser and flicked it on. Red warning lights lit up along its length. The clear tube in the middle started growing green, and it let out an ominous humming sound. Hopefully, they wouldn't have to demonstrate to May that it was aptly named. He raced back down the stairs. His mom was sitting in the living room with Kachan's parents, as well as Kirishima's dad's and Mina's moms, and Koda's ma and pa, and the parents or guardians of everyone in his class. Even Present Mike was sitting on one of the living room's more comfortable chairs. "What's going on?"
"Oh, the community center is closed for renovations," his mom explained. "So we're having our parent support group here instead."
Parent support group? He was just about to ask when another primeval roar reverberated across the city.
"Sorry, Mom, gotta run. School business. Bye!"
He could ask after they dealt with the attack of the 20-meter sea cucumber.